I went through all the scientific literature I could find to create a complete overview of the best smartwatches and wearables for sleep stage tracking, and the results are super interesting and some results are very surprising. We will see which devices are good at tracking your deep sleep, REM sleep and light sleep, and which devices are just terrible. I previously made a similar video about 1.5 years ago, but a lot has changed since then and a lot of papers have been published. And it's pretty clear that some brands are way ahead of the curve and some are really pretty bad. There'll always be some error and bias in the sleep tracking of wearables, but there are some brands which are really not reliable. In addition to over 50 results from scientific literature, we will also look at the results from my own scientific and systematic testing, which includes a lot of the most recently released wearables. So let's get to it, and as before, all the data and references are in the description below. By the way, for those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Rob and I'm a postdoctoral scientist specializing in biological data analysis. And let's start with the results from scientific literature, which you can see right here, and then slowly we'll be adding in better and better devices. Now the average agreement over the 4 stages, and with 4 stages I mean REM sleep, deep sleep, light sleep and awake time, that's along the horizontal axis right here, and the worst out of those 4 is along the vertical axis. Now, as I said, Xiaomi performed really poorly, so it only had about a 40% agreement on average over the 4 sleep stages, and the worst one was around 20%. So these are from 2 different studies, from the Mi Band 5 and the Mi Band 7. Let's now add the next worst device in scientific literature, and that's Garmin. So they generally used somewhat older devices, but they all fall in this area right here. So with an average agreement between 40 and 50%, and then the worst agreement, let's say between 20 and 30%. Slightly better than Xiaomi, but not a lot better. The next one I'm gonna add here is Huawei with the Huawei Watch GT2. Now I only found a single study where they had the data available for Huawei, which seems to do maybe a tiny bit better than Garmin, but not a lot, roughly in that same position. Now, as regular viewers will know, the next device you would likely expect is Polar. This in my testing and also in scientific literature doesn't appear to have a really bad sleep stage, but the overall performance is still somewhere in the Garmin range, though a recent paper did have one of their prototypes, which in the end is similar, I think, to either the Vantage V3 or M3 or that sort of range of devices. That seemed to do a little bit better. So it had both a better average agreement and a better overall agreement, but it's hard to say if there was actually an improvement or if this is random variation between the studies. So now we're getting to sort of the mediocre performing devices, and these also include Samsung, but again, I only had a single study for this. And the Galaxy Watch 3 did seem to do better than some Polar, Garmin, Huawei and Xiaomi devices. So we're slowly getting towards acceptable or good sleep stage agreement. And the next best brand in scientific literature is Whoop. Now this is all for a previous generation of sleep stage tracking, so it's hard to say how the new algorithm performs based on this, because we see better performing in my testing for the new algorithm that was introduced maybe half a year ago or so. And in scientific literature, this algorithm just hasn't been evaluated. But the old algorithm seems to do reasonably well. The worst sleep stage tends to be around 50, sometimes 60%, but in one case also around 40%. And the average agreement over the individual sleep stages is about, let's say, 61, 62% or so. So not terrible, but also not the best out there. But as said, Whoop does have a new sleep stage tracking algorithm, which does appear to be better. One device that has always done reasonably well is Fitbit. So Google now owns Fitbit, so all Google devices and all Fitbit devices use the same sleep stage tracking algorithm, so you can see that here in green. And this performs reasonably well, both for the older devices, but also the newer devices. There's a lot newer devices even now out there, and now Fitbit also has improved sleep stage tracking, and as you will see in my overview, there's a big difference between the old tracking, which is already pretty decent, and the new tracking, which is a lot better. Now another device which did well in my testing and also did well in the overview, here is the Withings Sleep Analyzer, which does about as well as Fitbit. You will see in my overview it's also in that area right there, pretty good sleep stage tracking, but not the absolute best. Now, the absolute best based on literature includes 3 brands, though one is what the company reported itself, so you have to be a bit skeptical there. My testing shows the same results, which is why I have some trust in it, but take that with a grain of salt. But that's the last brand I want to show you. Let's first look at the results for Apple. Now, Apple did reasonably well. I found 3 studies, one by Apple themselves, which is the best result, so again, be a bit skeptical. And the other results were pretty decent, though not as good as in my testing. So it's a reasonable sleep stage tracker based on scientific literature, potentially a tiny bit better than the old sleep stage tracking algorithm of Fitbit, but not quite as good as we saw in my testing. Now, a brand that does do really well in scientific literature is the Oura Ring. There's some old testing with the old algorithm down here, so this is the Oura Ring 2, but most testing nowadays done with the Oura Ring 3 already included the new sleep stage tracking algorithm. So the Oura Ring in pink right here, especially the Oura Ring 3 and now the Oura Ring 4, which has the same sleep stage tracking as the updated sleep stage tracking of the Oura Ring 3, seems to do really well. There's really good sleep stage tracking, up to an 80% agreement or close to 80% agreement with the reference. So really doing well. The only one that comes close is the 8 Sleep Pod. So that also did really well. It also does well in my testing. But again, the only results I could find was based on internal testing by 8 Sleep. So we have to take this with a grain of salt. But only because my testing shows similar results, I did want to include it right here. So we can see some really good performing devices and also some less good performing devices. Now there's a link to a Google Sheet in the description below that has all the references I used from this. You can extract the data yourself as well. I also report all the individual values, so feel free to go wild with that one. But next, let's take a look at the performance for each of those sleep stages themselves. So light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, and awake. I tried to create some overview that is reasonably informative. Now, if you do end up wanting to buy any of these devices, like a Whoop strap maybe, or a Fitbit device, an Oura Ring, an 8 Sleep Pod, an Apple Watch, whichever you're interested in, there are different affiliate links in the description below, most of which give you the best discount possible, and also a general Amazon affiliate link that helps support the channel and also helps support your wallet in most cases at the same time. It would really be appreciated if you do decide to get them to use one of those down below. It really helps keep this channel going because it's not cheap and you can support no matter what device you buy. Even if you buy something else random like dental floss, if you first click my Amazon affiliate link, it doesn't cost you any extra and it helps support the channel. Some people have even bookmarked the Amazon affiliate link with Command or Control D, I believe. And if you click that bookmark each time before you make an Amazon purchase, it helps support the channel and it doesn't cost you any extra. So that's a really easy way of supporting. But let's get back to the results. And as I said, let's take a look at an overview per sleep stage. And that's displayed in this overview right here. Now this is somewhat complicated, so I had to find a way of showing you it. But the different sleep stages are here along the vertical axis. So this first row right here is deep sleep agreement. Then we have light sleep agreement, REM sleep agreement, and awake time agreement. And the different brands are colored along the horizontal axis, which each of the individual tests and devices also marked on the bottom right here. So starting with Garmin, for instance, we can see it has mediocre deep sleep agreement. So deep sleep is here, this first row. Also pretty okay light sleep agreement, pretty bad REM sleep agreement, and really bad awake time agreement. So that's how you can interpret this. The lower these bars, the worse the results. Now, of course, some of these include the older results as well. You can see, for instance, right here that the Oura Ring 2 results do tend to be worse than the Oura Ring 3 results. Overall, Oura is doing a really good job, much better than Polar and Garmin. Also, Whoop is doing pretty well. Awake time seems to be something it struggles with more than, for instance, the Oura Ring. Then we have Fitbit right here. Again, for Whoop and Oura, it's the old sleep stage tracking algorithm in scientific literature. Most studies mostly seem to agree Whoop is pretty good at most sleep stages. Awake time, not the best. Then for Fitbit, we seem to have one outlying study. I hope I didn't make a mistake with data input there. Overall though, pretty solid overall. Deep sleep, not the absolute best with the old sleep stage tracking algorithm that is. But for REM sleep, it's actually pretty solid, where most devices struggle with REM sleep, especially Garmin for instance. Fitbit is pretty decent. And Apple is also pretty decent overall. Seems to struggle a bit more with deep sleep than, for instance, Oura does. And then in the end, we have some of the devices for which I only have 1 or 2 studies. So we have Xiaomi, which is just really bad overall. Only light sleep agreement isn't absolutely terrible, but REM sleep is really horrendous. Then we have Huawei, which also isn't very good. You can clearly see that Withings, which is beside it. Now this is only for the Withings sleep analyzer, not for the Withings watches, which I haven't tested recently. You can see that the Withings sleep analyzer does a decent job, where Samsung does seem to do a tiny bit worse than Withings. And H-Sleep is very solid overall, though again, this is internal testing of H-Sleep. But we're also going to take a look at my results. One thing I did want to highlight is that likely if you have a sleep disorder, the results aren't going to be quite as good. Let me show you. So let's now go back to this overview from before for a second. But now we're going to include a bunch of studies that looked at people with sleep disorders. And that's now marked in gray right here. And as you can see, all devices marked in gray were among some of the worst performers. Even things like the Aura Ring or the Withings Sleep Analyzer, all of them have much worse performance the moment people don't have typical sleep patterns. So take that into account. If you have a sleep disorder, you can likely not trust your wearable. Most devices are simply not built to deal with that. I actually spoke with the people at Fitbit/Google, and they said they did try to account for this more in their new sleep stage tracking algorithm, but I wasn't able to independently test this. As you might have noticed, many of the results shown in that overview were for relatively outdated devices. Now this is not a major issue in most cases, since most companies only change their sleep stage tracking algorithm every few years or so, and almost all companies use the same algorithm on all their devices, so you should get the same sleep stage tracking on almost any device from the same company. However, a few companies like Fitbit/Google and Whoop did release new sleep stage tracking algorithms recently, and those weren't tested in any of that scientific literature, but though they weren't tested there, I did test them myself. I also tested a bunch of other brands that were never tested in science, at least as far as I could tell. So let's take a look at those results. Okay, let's now take a look at the results for my testing right here. Again, we're gonna go from the worst devices to the best devices, and the worst device is again the Mi Band. Now we have the average agreement again along the horizontal axis. Sometimes this only includes 3 sleep stages, so light sleep, deep sleep and REM sleep, not awake time because my reference device has some issues with that. And the worst sleep stages again along the vertical axis. I should make some remarks here. My testing is not as reliable as scientific literature. First of all, the testing was just done on me. Second, my reference isn't quite as perfect. It's pretty decent, especially on me. I will link a paper on that in the description below. My dataset there is the QS dataset. And finally, I could only test most devices for, let's say, 5 to 10 days or so. It's a limited data set. All the data I'm going to show you here is from 3 reference devices, mostly the ZMax EEG headband, the one described in the reference. There's also the Dream 2 EEG headband, and I also did polysomnography sometimes on myself, which is the most complete way of tracking sleep, but I could only do this for some nights. But let's take a look at the results. In a later overview, you can see the difference between those different devices as well. First of all, as I said, the worst performing on me tended to be the Mi Band as well. So for some reason, the Mi Band 7 and Mi Band 10 showed somewhat better results, but most of the time my testing of the Xiaomi Mi Band also showed that it's not very good at sleep stage tracking. It was actually quite okay at heart rate tracking. You can check out that video if you want to, but for sleep stage tracking in particular, I wouldn't trust it. The next worst devices on me are Huawei devices, also not very good at sleep stage tracking, similar to what we saw in scientific literature. And also Garmin really isn't very good. Now more recent devices do tend to do a little bit better than some older testing that I did, like for instance on the Venue 2 Plus or the Vivo Smart 5. So there might have been a tiny bit of an improvement over the last few years, but still Garmin isn't good, I would say. It's decent at best or pretty okay at best. There's definitely better devices out there. Again, Polar potentially has a better agreement of the worst sleep stage, so it's marked in orange right here. But overall, it's somewhere similar to Garmin, not a lot better. Now, Samsung gave a bit mixed results on me. So the Fit 3 and some older devices like the Galaxy Watch 6 Classic really didn't do that well. But Samsung might have improved over the years, especially my recent testing of the Galaxy Watch Ultra 2, which wasn't tested in literature, did seem to do better than previous testing I did, and the same goes for the Galaxy Watch 8. I think I still have to release that video, but from what I remember, this might have been a bit better than previous testing. So Samsung might be improving, it's still not great, but better than for instance Xiaomi and Huawei. Now the Withings Sleep Analyzer right here also did a pretty decent job. I'm quite happy with it. It's something you put under your mattress so you don't have to worry about it, and it does a pretty decent job. Not amazing, but pretty good. Also, Whoop did a pretty good job, especially now with the new improved sleep stage tracking of the Whoop Strap MG and Whoop Strap 5.0. You can really see it's improving a little bit at least. At least that's what it seems like in my testing so far. But let's now get to the absolute best devices in my testing. And at the moment, there's actually 5 brands, but one wasn't really tested in scientific literature yet, or I didn't include it in my overview because it didn't pop up in my literature search. So let's focus on those 4 common brands that people have. First of all, the Oura Ring, especially with the new sleep stage tracking up here, seems to do really well. About as well as my new testing of the Whoop Strap MG. So both have pretty solid sleep stage tracking, but they're more or less on par at the moment. Fitbit/Google also seems to do really well, as you can see here in green. The old testing is this part right here, but then you can also see my newer testing of the Pixel Watch 4 and my retesting of the Pixel Watch 3 seem to do better than the old testing I did of those and other devices. So I previously tested the Pixel Watch 3, which I might have actually removed from this overview, but it was somewhere in this area right here. And the new Pixel Watch 4 and the new results for the Pixel Watch 3 do seem to be an improvement over the old sleep stage tracking algorithm. So all these devices right here should be compared to literature, and these are the new results. So Oura, Whoop, and Pixel/Google are doing a really good job. Now in my testing, Apple is doing even better. So on my body, my physiology, in my testing, Apple might be doing a tiny bit better than in literature. Still, in both cases, it's among some of the better performing devices. But in my testing, it's one of the best, maybe even the best, together with the Pixel Watch and together with the 8 Sleep Pod. So here you can see my testing of the 8 Sleep Pod 3, 4, and 5. And all of these give really good results. Now the 8 Sleep Pod is something you put around your mattress. So where the Withings Sleep Analyzer goes under your mattress, the 8 Sleep Pod is like a mattress cover in a way that actively cools and heats each side of the bed. It's my favorite sleep improvement device. Affiliate link up here or down here for the best discount possible. But it also has good sleep stage tracking and pretty good heart rate and heart rate variability tracking without having to wear anything on your body. So it's among some of the best performers in my testing and one of my favorite overall devices. But based on scientific literature and on these results, at the moment, I would recommend 8 Sleep, Pixel/Google, Apple, the Oura Ring, and potentially the Whoop Strap now with the new improved sleep stage tracking. So those are the only 5 commonly used brands that I would recommend for sleep stage tracking. But I also tested some brands that aren't in this overview because I couldn't find any scientific literature for them. So let me quickly show you those, because there's of course more options like Coros, Suunto, Sleep2. There's a bunch more things out there. And that overview is displayed right here. So this includes many more devices than the ones we were just looking at. It's the exact same overview, but now it's colored by a reference device. So the devices marked in green were measured against the Z-Max EEG headband, which can measure brain waves, is used in several scientific studies, and is my current preferred reference. I also really liked using the Dream 2 EEG headband, which are older devices not marked in any color. Unfortunately, Dream went bankrupt and the new company that acquired them didn't give access to consumers anymore. So basically I have 3 paperweights right now, or expensive paperweights. And then the devices marked in blue-purple were tested against polysomnography, or PSG, which is the most accurate way of measuring sleep, but just not doable on a daily basis. Now, many of the devices we were previously looking at are also in this overview, but there's a few that were left out. There's the Sleep2 or Nuqua app, which performs rather well. So that's the only one brand that we didn't mention before that had good results in my testing. There's also several Coros devices, which are amazing at GPS tracking, for instance, similar to Garmin, but they're not very good at sleep stage tracking. And the same is actually true for Suunto. I recently tested Suunto devices, again, more a sports watch, good at GPS tracking, not so much at sleep stage tracking. Okay, for some reason I forgot to add it before, but it's now right here. So you can see it's pretty okay, though not great. And the same goes for some smart rings like the Ultra Human Air right here, or the Amazfit Helio ring. Those also aren't very good sleep stage trackers. And the same is true, at least based on all testing I've done so far, for other Amazfit devices like the Amazfit Balance, the Amazfit Bip 6, and also the Amazfit Helio strap. But I'm actually recording a video right now on the Amazfit Helio strap, where I do see in this initial test some improvements of the sleep stage tracking. It might be out already, that video, and there we do see at least some improvement of Amazfit in terms of sleep stage tracking. It's still not one of the best performers, but potentially getting better, so I'm quite excited if Amazfit keeps investing, because at some point it could really become a Whoop contender on all categories. But for sleep stage tracking, at least at the moment, Whoop is doing better than Amazfit. So this overview right here shows you that there's a bunch of devices which still need to be tested in scientific literature. You can get a rough idea of the performance right here, but the results remain more or less the same. There are now 6 brands which I would recommend for sleep stage tracking: Apple, Oura, Whoop, 8 Sleep, Pixel/Google, and Sleep 2. Now this is all super interesting, but there are a few important remarks to make. But before getting to those, running this channel next to my full-time job as a scientist is not easy or cheap. I pay for editing by my editor Alex, for instance, and I also buy most of the devices myself. So if you want to help me keep this channel going, there are several ways you can help me do that. One way of supporting me and to get a great discount yourself is by using one of my affiliate links in the description below. For instance, for Whoop, 8 Sleep or Oura, but also if you want to buy a Garmin or Coros device on Amazon or Play Better. Also, a more direct way of supporting the channel is by becoming a YouTube member, which is like Patreon on YouTube. You can find that linked up here. But let's now get back to the results. So my personal testing mostly shows the same patterns as scientific literature. The main deviation, I would say, is that the Apple Watch seems to perform a bit better in my testing than in scientific literature. I don't know what to make of that, but more testing is needed. And I'm actually doing a detailed sleep stage test of many wearables with the University of Salzburg, and hopefully I can share those results with you soon. Overall, there are a few brands which I would just look at the total time asleep and my total time in bed for, and those include Garmin, Xiaomi, Huawei, Polar, and Samsung. So the sleep stages for these I wouldn't really trust, but you can still look at your total time spent in bed, for instance. Luckily, there are also some brands that seem to do consistently better both in my testing and in scientific literature, and these are Oura, Fitbit/Google, Whoop, and Apple. And for all of these, I think their sleep stage tracking is reliable enough to draw some conclusions each day based on the results you get. Now, 8 Sleep also did really well both in my testing and the internal testing that 8 Sleep published, which are consistent between them, but I would like to see some more independent testing, because independent testing is always important. Now, I do think my testing is independent in a way, but it's just on me and it has major limitations in that regard. Now, overall, I would always recommend whatever device you use to combine your own subjective feelings and weigh that with the measurements of those based on the device. And you can weigh them based on how much trust you have in your own feelings and in the device. Also, there's a bunch of other important metrics measured during sleep that we didn't talk about, like resting heart rate and heart rate variability, or HRV in short. So we didn't look at them at all here, and that's for a future video to discuss. Now, if you do decide to buy a new device, don't forget to give yourself the best discount possible, at least in most cases, with my affiliate links down below, or to become a YouTube member. And I think you will like this video on the Whoop strap or this video on the Apple Sleep Score.